Welcome to the Vest Capital Podcast, the go-to platform for accredited investors, real estate developers, and entrepreneurs seeking to build wealth by investing in private real estate.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
Every time, every night is a loose one. And every flight, you know that I put the crew on. You say that I drop top.
Welcome back to the Vest Capital Podcast. My name is Tanner Wiedrickson, your host. As always, it is a pleasure for you guys to lock in and be here with us today. We have a very special guest on the pod right now, our very own Max Quinn. Welcome to the podcast, Max.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. It's been a run. It's been a sprint, actually, since you have joined the team. I want to explore more about, your background, not only as, a aspiring entrepreneur, if you will, but also, your athletic career that you've had in sports, your time in Hawaii, kind of like the general backstory of how you got to this position. And then we'll go ahead and dive in a little bit more on our time together.
For sure. So starting with the background, ever since I was a kid, I've always been interested in real estate. I'd say since I was a junior in high school, I knew that I wanted to do real estate. So I did internships like every summer up until college. I did commercial real estate, residential real estate, but those internships primarily lied in the brokerage space, which I never really found a niche for. And then once I got into Hawaii, which was interesting for me because when I originally went out there, I had never been to Oahu before, and I didn't know a single person on the island. But since then, I made lifelong friends, and while I was in college, I was able to secure a lucrative job for a real estate developer out there, one of the top real estate developers on Oahu, doing land acquisitions and creative sales for them, which is what got my foot in the door in the development space. And from there, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. I love real estate development, and I had a passion for it. When I was doing it in college while going to school full time, I loved every minute of it. So from there,
Let me jump in really quick, actually.
Yeah,
so,
go ahead.
Love the energy that you're bringing and love how you identified that opportunity and you capitalized on it. Tell me more about that process because if you're a real estate developer, there is not a lot of room for any unnecessary risk. So how did you get your foot in the door and how did you, if you will, sell yourself to them to convince them to have you participate as part of the team?
Well, it's actually a funny story. I was at a bar with my buddy whose dad was visiting at the time. And I told him, hey, he asked me, hey, what are you looking to do with your degree? And I said, oh, real estate. And he said, oh, I know a buddy on the North Shore that does real estate development. Let me hook you up with him and see if he can get you an internship or a job or something. I said, sure, let's do it. And I had contacted that developer, and I hadn't heard anything back. It had been like 2 or 3 months over the summer, right? And so I had gone home for the summer and then came back, and I was like, you know what? Like, a no isn't going to do anything bad, right? When did a no ever hurt anybody? So I decided to, contact him again and say, hey, like, are you guys still open to this? And we did. He was, and we met up, and he had offered me a job, but up front he told me, there's no BS, and just be straight up with your work ethic and get the job done. If something bad happened, just be straight up about it. And we had kind of clicked as far as the entrepreneurial mindset goes. And so he kind of gave me a chance through that.
Love it. That's awesome. And going back to your junior year, what made it about your junior year where that was the, catalyst movement right there going into real estate? Was it something that you read or saw? What was that moment like for you?
I had done so much education on watching YouTube videos and whatnot on real estate generational wealth, and that's like one of the easiest. 99% of millionaires are made from real estate. But beyond that, on a deeper level, the beginning of my junior year, I suffered a traumatic injury in football where I almost died, and so I was out of school for like 2 or 3 months. And I had a lot of time to think and realize stuff. And it was through that time that I kind of got into like, what does my future look like? And that's kind of when I came across real estate and grew a passion for it.
So it was literally a traumatic experience where you almost lost your life, and you had that moment to go on a recovery path.
I had time to think, and the time to think caused me to be able to come up with that.
That's very powerful. You're going to look back at that, and that's going to be almost a driving force, right?
100%.
When the road gets tough and there's obstacles,
Yes.
for you to go back to your why and think, hey, life is a gift.
It is a
and you have to transform that point of adversity to more opportunity. And I'm sure that you probably had hopes on, growing your athletic career maybe in the collegiate level as well, perhaps, or did that get cut short also with this injury, I'm presuming?
No, I was never looking to go to collegiate. Where I found passion in sports primarily is with skiing and surfing. The reason I love those two sports so much is just being in the elements. I feel connected to. It's more of a solo sport, and being connected with the space around you and the elements just feels really good. It's like floating. You
and nature together.
Exactly.
Unified as one.
Yeah.
Love it. Very cool. Let's fast forward to today then. So I'll kind of jump in here and share my experience.
Yeah.
So we had recently finished our acquisition and improvement plan for our piece of real estate here in the Northwest. And I arrived to the office one morning and one team member said, hey, someone dropped off some information, said contact them. I think we had a job posting out as well that you applied for. And we thought it was cool that somebody dropped by. And then I didn't have a chance to connect with you then. But I believe that you came back a second time. And then
I was looking for you both times.
Okay.
You were gone.
0 for 2. 0 for 2. I was out putting deals together.
Yes.
That's what was going on. Yes, exactly. So that mindset transfers over to that experience as well, right? You seeking me out and the team out and whatnot. So did you essentially parlay your Hawaii experience over here?
Yeah.
Is that essentially the approach that you took?
I came back here for some family reasons, and I was driving one day by one of your projects, the Best Capital's projects, and I saw the sign. I was like, wow, they're a real estate development firm. And I looked you guys up, and I was like, wow, that's really cool. I kind of want to work there. So I printed off my resume, came in here, and dropped it off 2 separate times. And also applied for, luckily at that same time, you guys had a listing on, I think it was Indeed or something, and applied that, even though I knew that that wasn't the job for me, but it was a way to get myself recognized or noticed. So that's what I did.
Love it. No, that's so important because in often cases, you may not lock in the position that you're targeting, especially in your era of your professional career, right, that you're launching. But if you can create even a new position or a new opportunity and be bullish about that, then that's super important for the younger up-and-coming demographic that is listening and locking in. So
I do remember when we did have our first sit down and chat. It was about an hour and a half long, and we were chatting, and there was no necessarily optimal outcome or outcome that we were pursuing through that conversation. But I do remember that we ended up creating a new space for that to be applied.
Love it.
A new job, yeah.
Was it an hour and a half that we gave you?
I remember that, yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought it was going to be I think we both thought it was going to be a 15-minute
yeah, I think so.
It turned out to an hour and a half.
It turned out to be an hour and a half. Well, that's good news for you and for us, is what it's turned out to be. So this is good stuff, Max. All right. So talk to me more about what you have been working on and what you've learned. Let's focus on those two things, right? Because you do have your undergraduate degree, and I believe it's a finance degree, correct?
Yep.
You've got it. Super important in this space. And as you know, there's really no Exhibit A in a textbook manual as far as how to execute an investment deal. So what have you learned and what are you working on right now?
Yeah, so initially it started off as primarily just doing investor relations, and that pertained to raising capital for the company as well as structuring the debt and equity capital stack. So I've learned a ton about how the fund works, the different part of the capital stacks, you've got senior debt, mezzanine debt, first position pref, and second position pref equity. And just being able to optimize those different pieces to make something that is attractive to the investor and their risk profile, et cetera, all those things is really important. So my primary thing has been in the investor relations from the get-go, but now it's kind of flowed into also some land acquisitions. And what I've realized is those two areas really are intertwined. So now doing land acquisitions, I work with landowners to structure deals and also create just optimal outcomes for the firm through those negotiations processes with LOIs and PSAs all alike.
You're touching on a lot of great topics, and let's talk about the interconnection between land acquisition and investor relations. For those that may be familiar with how we structure our deals, will connect with this comment I'll be making right now. When it comes to capital, if we can become the banks, then we take that approach. It's very costly to put together real estate transactions. And I'll offer you an example. The last deal that we just acquired last week, the cost that I incurred to close on that asset was in excess of 6 figures just to put the deal together. And that would be at a high level. It would be legal fees. It would be lenders' origination fees and expenses that we had to incur, right? There was excise taxes that we had to pay as well because it was a hospitality acquisition. So it was on the actual cost of goods sold and the retail components within the furnishings that we've acquired. So very costly. Every time that we can creatively structure the capital stack and become the bank, or at least have our sellers put up the capital, that reduces the costs and it'll increase the upside for the firm and the investors as well. All right, jumping back into the acquisition side, you recently pulled off an incredible feat, and tell us more about the off-market deal that you put together, and go into a bit more of a granular level as far as the intricacies, and the nuances of structuring that deal.
100%. First and foremost, I will say the hustle and the grind of getting an off-market deal is something I just enjoy for some reason. I think a lot of people just like to use on-market deals, which means they're listed on the MLS. But the benefit of doing an off-market deal is you have the power to negotiate and structure with the actual landowner as opposed to working through a realtor. And oftentimes you can achieve more optimal outcomes through that. But with this specific deal last week, this piece was a super sexy piece. Off the get-go, I saw that. I was working with the landowner who actually was quite a legacy family in our area. They own a civil engineering firm that's been here for decades now, and they're one of the top dogs in our area. But this landowner, you have to kind of realize when you're working with somebody specifically, especially when they're outside of the professional arena, when to and how to communicate with them on their level. So, for example, I knew that this landowner that I was working with was more of a boots and flannel guy as opposed to a suit and tie person, right? And I was able to recognize that when he was talking about other firms that he was working with before us, what he had mentioned that he didn't like about them, and certain subtle, almost subconscious communication. You have to take that, interpret it, and kind of translate it to use to your advantage when you are talking with these individuals.
These are good nuanced points, and I'll touch on a couple of them right now, right? So it's being authentic and connecting with the particular seller in this case, right?
Of course.
But by also understanding what's important to him and connecting at a level that is of most value and benefit to him. So you picking up on key points as far as his other comments, working with other developers, and not being a good fit. It's really important that you have a stark contrast and you really clearly line up why we are different from the other folks. And if I recall properly, he had some nationals and regional players that had a different approach as opposed to us, which was very much neighborhood style, right? In his own backyard, us having the capital behind us and the experience to execute this deal and perform. Because at the end of the day, the seller wants to be certain that we can perform. And they would often cases select another known player, regional or national, even though if they didn't necessarily like how the negotiations went, because they know they can perform and they can close. So if we can accomplish them both together, that's where the value happens.
Yeah, and I would say the other half of that is definitely you want to build that relationship almost on a friendship basis with your seller, right? And I will say specifically with this seller, I loved working with him. He was a great guy, really trustworthy and a good guy.
Yep, agreed. You know, loyalty is very difficult to find when you're selling high-profile pieces of real estate, but this particular seller likely had other alternatives that may have been even, the terms may have been even perhaps better than ours. Price may have been better than ours as well. But in the day, he did commit to us, and we got the deal done. So that's another testament for us doing what we say we're going to be doing and executing. So love that. Let's talk about, you know, I want to add more color as far as the, you know, art and science of mastering negotiations. We talked about, you know, always looking at the seller's position and then integrating our interests with theirs. It's the alignment between two parties. That's super important. What I want to highlight also is the ability to see the vision of the development, to clearly articulate what the vision is going to look like. But what's also even more important than the vision is the execution and assembling the business plan. As developers, I often look at ourselves as leading an orchestra. So you have many different talented players, you know, if you will, on the field, and you have to understand each and everyone's strengths and weaknesses, and you have to be able to assemble the symphony to then put together a really compelling piece. So that starts from really day one when you identify that particular, you know, opportunity, and you have to understand what players you need to bring on board. So if we talk more about, if we kind of keep on utilizing this as an example, high-profile piece, it requires a ton of entitlement work. And our particular jurisdiction, they're going through their new comprehensive plan. And that's going to be going on concurrently while we're going through the land application process. So to actually establish and forge relationships with the city as well, that's important. So I'll jump in here and I'll say that I've taken the assertive, you know, actions to facilitate these meetings to be uber transparent as far as what our business plan looks like and what the community needs. If we're community centric and look at what the demands are, the economic demands and the civil demands of the city, we can also present a plan that would concurrently go through that'd be more advantageous. So what I'm describing here is many multiple points, nuance points that put together the overall deal structure. So within the purchase and sales agreement, you're going to have certain milestones, and those also have to align with the land use process. So it's not a matter of looking at the dirt and giving them an offer and then walking away. There's a lot of thought that puts into this. In fact, just over 4 months of work that we put into this.
Yeah, I'd say that's definitely the best way to look at the developing side of it. The orchestration analogy is really how it works, and there's so many moving parts, so many moving players, and orchestrating that starting from the end and moving backwards to the front where you're submitting that offer, right? So as a developer, I know, always have to have the vision in mind. What does it look like at the end, and what do we have to achieve moving backwards in that space? Do we have the resources and the capabilities to do that before we even submit this offer?
Yep, exactly. Yep, reverse engineer. What does your exit look like? And you have to build the business plan from the back end to the front end. Yep, so it's the elephant example, right? You can't eat the elephant all at once. You have to take bite-sized pieces on it. Let's go back to you, Max, 23 years young, up and coming. Our average investor is approximately 63, 65 years old. You have impressed us with your ability to connect with that particular demographic in such a way where they make, you know, them feel comfortable in communicating with you. But I'm sure it's not always easy. Tell us more about, your experience working with a more seasoned demographic that is very affluent, right? Where you might not have the experiences that they have, not only on the capital experience front, right, with a multi-decade track record of experience, but actually presenting to them a very complex business plan and allowing them to even consider allocating with us.
Yeah, I think off the get-go, my degree in finance definitely helps with that. I learned about equity and derivatives and debt and all those things. But on a deeper level, I've always had a knack for being able to communicate with people older than me. Like when I was a younger kid, I always got along with my friends' parents when I was over at their house and whatnot. But when it comes to sitting down with an investor who's twice my age, if not more, and they have tons of experience on what we're having a discussion about, it's really about being as educated and seasoned as you can on what you're talking about. I've read our legal documents, our PPM subscription agreement, multiple times, so I'm always trying to be prepared and on my A game when I'm in that conversation. But at the same time, it's a little bit about being vulnerable in that conversation and understanding that you don't know absolutely everything. And I think that these older people sometimes do appreciate that, and they understand that I'm hustling, but at the same time, I have made efforts to be as educated as I can.
Good. And that was part of our training that we put forward to you as well, is putting a disproportionate amount of time on the preparation. That was my first assignment to you was, hey, go over the PPM.
Yeah.
And then once you finish with it,
The private placement memorandum.
yes, go over it again, right? And this PPM is no less than,
It's like 80 pages.
it's significant. Yes, plus. And then you have the operating agreement to accompany it, and then you have your subscription agreement. So the trifecta of investment offering documents. So I wanted you to know that private placement memorandum like the back of your hand, so you can then present it in such a way with conviction and power, right? And then, like you said, if you don't have all the questions, you got a team behind you that can go and address it. So that's super important. One item I want to touch on as well is you also are an investor into Vest Capital. How had that, why did you choose to make that investment? And does that act as a tool for when you're out there as well, educating potential investors about our funds?
Yes. So first off, it does provide help with conviction for sure, because I've backed what I believe in, and so when I go and talk to people, I feel like, hey, like I'm vested in this as well, right? I believe in this. And so I also was able to go through the process of investing, which really is pretty easy here at Vest Capital. I think we take a little pride in that, is how easy and it is for that to work. So when I am talking to investors, I can explain what the process looks like and how it works.
Love it. Good. We do make it quite easy to invest when it comes down to it. And then there is a due diligence process that we allow them to go through to ensure they are accredited. So we satisfy our conditions as well. Absolutely. Entering the modern era, I believe that access to direct deal flow is really where affluent investors should consider exploring a lot of their time. The public markets are incredible, durable, blue chip opportunities are available, at a high level, but the amount of appreciation and value add on those assets may not be as favorable as some of the private placement offerings. It does come with a different level of risk, of course, because of the size of our firms and the amount of resources that we have access to over theirs. So when it comes to the private markets, what is your opinion on private versus public investing?
Yeah, I think private is always better at the end of the day, in my opinion. The public markets, especially if you're just investing in the S&P 500 or just a general market like the Dow Jones, most people are averaging like 6 to 8% annually. And our fund opportunities are greater than that. But also on top of that, when you're looking at the private markets and specifically real estate, your assets are a lot more secure and backed by real assets, which is an attractive thing. And I think that within the public market, there's so many more players and so many more people manipulating what's actually going on. It's way more vulnerable and volatile than a lot of people think it actually is. As opposed to in the private markets, you have a lot more control, and there's a lot less players.
Mm-hmm. You've got it. Yep. One element that I do like about the private markets is the ability to be nimble and move in and out quickly. Mm-hmm. That's important to adapt, especially with the AI and the robotics that are coming in full force right now. You have to be in a position to interpret what you can leverage and then deploy it. So some of the other outfits that might not be as versatile, they're more stuck in the mud, then they might struggle with that. When it comes to, you earning your stripes, I think that I've kind of set a tone for everyone has to pay their dues. And what has that experience been like when you show up in the morning, leave later, as far as earning stripes? Do you have a chip on your shoulders that you're trying to prove, or do you feel like you're just going to, chip away at the work on a daily basis and that's going to compound and yield you the fruits that you're looking for? What game are you playing right now, and how is your position in the acquisitions and the investor relations helped mold your early career right now?
Mm-hmm. I think it's a combination of that. Also, I've always been keen to delayed gratification and taking joy in that. I think a lot of people my age, it's difficult to have delayed gratification and to pursue that. But I've seen that fruits of that. For example, the opportunity to work here, my delayed gratification has got me that. And working here will enable so many more opportunities. So I think, that's really what it is.
Love it. It's about delivering the results and being consistent.
Mm-hmm.
So important. Delayed gratification, many people want the view but don't want to take the climb. So
Exactly.
If you can take the climb and don't look behind you and just look ahead for the most part, then you'll be all right.
Yeah, I feel like working here, I've been learning at 1,000 miles an hour and taking in so much good information. And if I can help the team out and help my community while doing that, that's a great too.
The tide rises all ships.
Exactly.
Max,
I love that when you say that.
Yeah, that's good. Appreciate you. Thank you for your time. And if you have any other investment-related questions, feel free to reach out to Max and look at our deal flow. We got pretty robust pipeline right now, and the fund is in redemption currently as we speak. So we're in a mindset of selling assets and being into a liquid position and striking while the iron's hot.
Sure do. Thanks so much for having me, Tanner. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.